Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to answer the question of why do some people and coaches and other people tell people not to touch their chest on the bench press? I get asked this a lot when I tell people they should be touching their chest, of why does this person say not to? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Well, in some cases, the person is saying it because they're an idiot. Let's just be honest here. There are a lot of people who say things who give bad advice, right? Who don't know what they're talking about in spite of the fact that they won whatever bodybuilding competition or whatever it is that they do. Doesn't mean that they actually know what the hell they're talking about. So there's that factor. But then when you see people who are trainers and coaches who say, hey, don't touch your chest because you could get hurt and everything else, there are reasons they're saying that, but their actual advice is very, very, very misplaced. It's very misplaced. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that any person who cannot safely touch their chest on a bench press, maybe due to leverages or something else, let's assume it comes down to a leverage issue. There's a better fix for that. And that leverage issue can be some people are very, very small. Like you're a very skinny, underweight noob with a small rib cage, right? So it's like, for me, I come down and bench, and it's to here, right? That's as low as I can go because of my rib cage. Some people can go way, way lower, and it can end up creating a problem again with rotator cuffs and other stuff. But also that has to do with benching really high on the chest. Part of it is that most people cannot seem to be taught, well, not most people. That's actually a misnomer. A lot of really stupid gym bros are so caught up in bro culture in the gym that you cannot convince them not to bench high up on their chest, right? And so people tend to want to bench way up here with their elbows way flared out. Well, if you touch your chest doing that, and particularly if you have a small rib cage, you are eventually going to get hurt. You're causing internal rotation of the shoulder joint. And so what a lot of people, and I remember even Jeff Cavalier telling people that, oh yeah, just don't touch your chest. And he's saying that, and it's not because he doesn't know better, it's because he knows that some people are too stupid to be taught how to bench correctly. In other words, instead of bringing the bar down here, see how my shoulders are doing? You bring the bar down here, right? Lower chest. Nipple line or lower. And when you do that, look what happens. There is no internal rotation. You can't do it. So your quick fix for that, for most people who don't have a really, really shallow rib cage who it's a problem, your solution is to just bench lower on the chest, right? The problem completely goes away that we're concerned with. The only time you're going to develop too many problems there might be, again, if you're smaller rib cage and you're too interior dominant. You don't do a lot of pulling work for your shoulders and upper back and everything. So in other words, you're not doing rows, pull-ups, face pulls, and everything in proportion to your pressing. You might develop problems over time. But for most people, that's a solution. Well, the thing is that we run into a bigger issue with benching to the upper chest and trying to just stop it short. And most people should be able to figure out what this is. You have no safeties in place. In other words, if a person is benching like that, they're going to tend to develop very tight chest. Everything's going to get tighter. They're not going to develop mobility or anything else. And it's going to tend to get very, very tight, and then they just stop when it gets really tight. Well, that's well and good, but what happens when eventually, because you've had people just stop in the middle of the air with an ambiguous range of motion, what happens when they've been doing this for a year or two and they build an actual strength base and they have some decent weight on the bar and they miss a rep? What happens when they fail a rep and their spotter doesn't grab it fast enough? The weight's going to come all the way down. Now, they develop a certain amount of tightness that is reduced mobility in the chest, like we saw with Jerry Ward. Jerry Ward tore a pec when that happened, didn't he? Tore a pec. Because of doing too many partials, he didn't have mobility. Well, you're not developing proper mobility in your chest and shoulders. So what's going to happen? You get really tight and you're predisposing yourself to injury. Well, what happens when one day the bar just magically goes all the way down? Because you hit failure. You miss a rep. And it will happen eventually. Might happen after a year. It might happen after 5 years. Well, when that happens and you're in that bad position up high on the chest and everything's too tight, the bar comes down, too far down. When you hit failure and you either tear a pec or you damage a rotator cuff or both, or you tear both pecs, right? You'd be like Jerry Ward and tear both of them. That's terrible advice to tell people to do that. It's terrible advice. If for whatever reason you have a person who, due to their structure, cannot touch their chest till they put more meat on their chest, you need some way to stop the weight from coming down. In other words, they need to be doing board presses. That's why board presses exist. I would never tell anyone to bench in a rack that way, though, by the way. That will beat your joints up also. If you had to choose between doing partials in a rack where you're hitting metal on metal versus just making them bench lower on the chest, even if it's a bit much on their range of motion due to their structure while you're trying to bulk them up, I would still rather them bench lower on the chest than do the range of motion that you think might be ideal while beating on pins, because the beating on pins will injure you. There's a reason powerlifters do not do that. Right? Powerlifters who perfected partials, that became a mainstay in equipped powerlifting, they know that metal on metal doesn't work. They know that that hurts you. That was figured out really, really fast in the powerlifting world. That's why board presses were developed. You have a soft touch. You hit a piece of wood instead of a piece of metal. Makes a big difference as far as beating your joints and everything up go. So your solution is either a board press, a carpet press, or the floor press. That's the only complaint a lot of people have about the floor press. It's a stricter exercise in the bench. It's a great exercise. It's just that for some people it's a partial. But do you see where I'm going with that? If it's a partial for you because you don't have a big enough chest, back, and rib cage yet, then you can also use it to control the range of motion for someone who's still trying to build up their base so that they can get full range of motion strength training. Incorporating some floor press is a way to limit that for safety purposes for someone who really structurally can't go all the way down as easily because, again, they're just too thin. Their torso is just too thin for now. The floor press is a fantastic solution. Then you don't need safeties, you don't need a board press, you don't need special equipment. You can just get on the edge of a rack, unrack it while laying on the floor and press. And it'll teach you to learn to explode from a dead stop. There won't be much touch and go, because that's how you get hurt on the floor press, is if you bounce your elbows off the floor. So it forces you to learn to train from a dead stop as well. That has great carryover. So that's kind of what I would recommend as a solution for someone who structurally cannot do that. But by that same token, what's hilarious, how many trainers out there will you see tell guys not to touch your chest on a bench press, but then they'll have them do dumbbells? Do you see how idiotic that is? What's the purpose of a dumbbell? Why do we dumbbell bench? Because you get a deeper range of motion. The bar doesn't get in the way. People say, no, it's to create train both sides evenly. Dumbbells don't do that. Dumbbells have no more potential for unilateral balance than a barbell does. That's a complete myth. I've covered that before in the past as to why that is. I should probably cover that again. It does not fix muscle imbalances. That's bullshit. The bad technique that you ingrain with a barbell that causes muscle imbalances, you will replicate the exact same thing when you get under a pair of dumbbells. So it doesn't do that. We use dumbbells because you can get a deeper stretch. Well, if you have a person, due to their structure, you can't have them go all the way down on a bench press, or you're concerned to too deep of a stretch because their rib cage is just too small and their chest is too small because they haven't built up enough. Why would you have them do dumbbells? You're putting them right back in the same position. So that's kind of the ridiculousness that we see with a lot of trainers and coaches out there who will tell people not to touch your chest on a bench press due to injury risk of the bar coming too low. We'll have them get on dumbbells. Total absurdity. And with dumbbells, especially with one on either side, it is far easier for your weak side to hit failure and fatigue and for you to come too far down and tear something. It's actually a really big risk, particularly people who do partials with dumbbells, because if you're worried about them going too low, you're going to have them do partials with dumbbells, aren't you? It's not going to be all the way down. And when you hit failure or get close to failure on dumbbells, they tend to just jerk down and over the weak side. Usually your left if you're right-handed. It tends to just come down easier, and it puts you into an even deeper stretched position than the barbell is capable of going, that can cause injury if something goes wrong. And so you end up getting hurt even worse than if you had used a barbell. You guys remember what was it? Devin Physique tore his pec doing this silly shit? Right here on YouTube, I did a video on it. Tore his pec doing silly shit, doing partials with dumbbells, and then went too heavy and the weight went too low. Tore his pec right there on camera. So it's kind of ridiculous that you have these trainers who will do that, isn't it? When your real solution is to learn to, number one, bench correctly. Number two, if you have someone who anatomically cannot go all the way down, board presses or floor presses are your solution. That's your fix. You don't ever just stop in midair with an ambiguous range of motion. That will eventually get people hurt. It's well-meaning advice, but it's actually dangerous and harmful. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.